Master clocks from 1900 to 1950 primarily had two technologies. High-end master clocks were weight-driven. They were more expensive, more accurate, but more difficult to move around due to their weight and size. ITM has other YouTube videos focused on weight-driven clocks. But the majority of the master clocks from international time recording, as well as from Standard Electric and other manufacturers, were spring-driven clocks. They were more affordable, performed well, and were easier to install and maintain. Inside most self-winding, spring-driven master clocks, you'll find a typical movement with the addition of coils as well as contacts. I've removed this set of coils from the clock movement and hooked it up to a separate power supply, which I alternately turn on and off to show the attractive capability of the coil in it pulling a wrench to it, as well as when energized, if it loses its power, it releases. When mounted back inside the movement, you can easily see the coil's attractive capability pulling the bar over and then releasing it when the power is turned off. This is the key to initiating the movement, winding. When the plate is attracted to the electromagnet, there is a subassembly which links up into the movement to the winding gear. At the top of the subassembly is a pawl that reaches in and grabs onto a winding gear inside the movement. Looking from the front of the movement, you can see that winding pawl reach in, grab the gear, and as the power is released, it pulls the gear back, giving it a winding movement. Once a minute, it gives it 1 minute's worth of wind. This version of an ITR winder actually winds it on the release of the magnet, as compared to the earlier versions which wind on the activation or pushes away the winding gear. For the first half of the 1900s, electricity in clocks was used in this fashion to energize coils that would be found both in the movement of self-winding clocks like these, but also in slave clocks as well as in other relays. The other key piece of a self-winder is the contacts, seen here in the upper left of this international master clock. The original contacts on an international self-driven clock look like this, with two blades that fell off a cam at varying times, initiating the energizing of the magnet. Once a minute, the contact arms would fall off of the cam at varying times, and that would close the circuit, pushing the contacts close at the top, allowing the coil to energize and the winding activation to commence.
If a spring-driven clock isn't running and you come in and you find it stopped, one of the things that you can do to start the diagnosis process is to look at the escape wheel with the saw teeth on it and look at the pallets on either side and see how they're engaging with the escape wheel. If you move the pendulum stick a bit to give it a little bit of a rock, you notice how the escape wheel is pivoting back and forth and not advancing to the next tooth. That's telling me that I've lost all of my wind on this clock and there's nothing propelling the escape wheel in a clockwise direction. If I have a problem with the winding mechanism, the first thing that I can do is just interject some winds into the system to see if in fact the movement works. And the way I can do that is by pressing on the back of this pallet several times, up to 59 or 60 times, and that puts some wind on the spring. It simulates the effect of having the electromagnet pull the armature over. Now when I give the pendulum stick a little push, you can see the escape wheel start to turn. Now taking a closer look at the escape wheel, you can see that the spring is wound up and the escape wheel is moving quickly over to the pallets, engaging until it rocks up and it's able to pass underneath. That's the way it should look.
Having determined that the winder is not operating, it's now up to some diagnostics with a multimeter and a power supply and some hot wires to figure out where along my circuit and do I have a break prohibiting the coil from energizing. A common problem is a broken coil wire. Looking in at the side, you can see where the coil is attached to the frame that should be disconnected before removing the coils to get a better look at exactly what might be failing underneath. The removal takes place by unscrewing 2 screws in the front and the back of the movement and pulling the coils out. If you do find a broken coil, such as in this picture, the one thing you want to do next is look for the small hole that comes out the edge of the coil where the wire is protruding. Take a toothpick or some other device and back that wire out of the coil holder, the spool, and unwind it a little bit. Give yourself something to work with. The next step is to clean off the end. There's shellac on the end that prevents connectivity, so you put a little sandpaper on the edge, rub it a few times on all sides, and you now have an active end of that coil lead. Next thing to do is to refeed the coil through the hole, and you're good to go, remount it back into the movement.
When the movement is properly tuned or in beat, the pallet on the left and the pallet on the right should be in contact with the escape wheel teeth for the same amount of time. So if you watch closely, as the left one engages and then releases, is that about the same period of time that the right one is engaged and releases? That way you know the clock is in beat.
If it's out of beat, you can turn the adjusting screw at the top of the movement until it's accurate. The International Master Clock featured in this video is a spring-driven clock manufactured in 1930. Based upon a service label inside the door, I know that this clock was continuing to be running until 1985 and probably beyond. That's 55 years of service or 30 million activations of the rewind mechanism. It's a true testament to the longevity of the international spring-driven movement. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. Check us out on YouTube as well as at internationaltimemachines.com.